Great. I have pressed record. People may still join, but shall we kick off? And we're obviously recording it for people who can't make the session but have accepted.
Perfect.
Thank you.
No worries. In that case, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the session. I am very happy to be here. My name is Steve Allison. I work for Adobe and I look after our data and audience technologies here in EMEA. Now, many of you probably know Adobe, PDFs, Photoshop, those wonderful things that we have there. But also, we are one of the major players in digital marketing, and that ability to use data, to use digital channels to make our workflows more efficient, to enable us to create true personalization, true experiences for users, actually is at a really exciting stage at the moment. And I'm going to talk through this morning some of those trends that we see, some of the ways that we see creating experiences is becoming more interesting and more exciting. As I go through, please feel free to use the chat to ask any questions that you want. If there is something that you're bursting to ask, raise your hand and we'll take those as we go. But otherwise, there will be an opportunity to take questions at the end. And obviously, this is being recorded. If we don't get round to doing everything, then you are completely free to contact Adobe, myself, Emma, the other members of the Adobe team on the call today, and we will do our best to give you all the information you need. So let's get started. It's interesting that today, data is how we understand things, how we understand our patients, how we understand what's going on in our businesses. It's using data, collecting data, analyzing data, seeing the flow of data through systems. And that's both interesting and actually quite complicated to do. But there are a number of ways that we can make the usefulness of data truly available to our desires to create better experiences for our users. One of the big problems that we tend to face is the fact that data comes from lots and lots of places, from interactions directly with us, from our partners, from all over the place. So we need a way of starting to build that data into a cohesive picture so we can start to understand what's going on. Now, we generate 2.5 quintillion bytes of data per day. That's 18 zeros if you're counting. That is a phenomenal amount of data that gets generated every single day. And you would have thought that with that much data, even if we take a tiny slice of it, we ought to know those people that are interacting with us on digital channels and offline and everything else. If only. It's not quite that simple. As many of you are aware, there are things that make collecting data and using data a bit more tricky than might first appear. Cookieless, major topic at the moment. Third-party cookies were used to monitor and track people and understand who came back and all those kinds of things. Fabulous. Great technology, totally disrespected any sense of privacy or anything like that. So with good reason, less and less reliance can be made on cookieless now. We need to start moving to other ways of understanding. And there are fabulous other ways of understanding and using data in a consented way. We'll talk about those as we go through. Devices now have built-in privacy, which again stop us from collecting data and understanding what's going on unless explicitly granted access by those users. Again, some people do it, some people don't, but it starts to make it difficult to have a universal method of collecting data. Big one, of course, is consent. How do we get people to consent if they're going to sign in, if we're going to collect first-party data? How do we get all that information? How do we get that consent? How do we prove that actually we are giving value for them handing over data so that we can understand them and help them along their health journeys, along their experiences that we are creating within our organizations? It becomes an interesting question, and one that is actually being solved quite well now as people rethink how to use data and how to use that to build experiences for customers. Actually, it boils down to trust. If someone trusts you, then they'll give you the data. we have numerous reports that follow that kind of thesis. So we know that if you can prove value, if you can prove that you're using that data sensibly, people are actually quite happy to hand over that data. So that helps us to some degree. How do we build that trust? It's all about having proper data governance in place. It's about actually using it to provide a better experience. Okay, I'll pause there because actually, historically, certainly in my industry of retail commerce and financial services and all that kind of stuff, they collected a heck of a lot of data, but didn't always give back to the customer. They didn't give back to the patient. That is important. If they see the information they've given you being used to make their journey easier, to make the content more relevant to them, that is a really great way of proving that there was a point to them giving you the data, and it's a great trust builder. Content is everything. Getting the right content in front of people's eyes is, for a lot of people, the definition of receiving good personalized information, relevant information to them. And maybe surprisingly, having said what I've said in my introduction, people do actually trust AI. 63% of the EMEA population believe that AI actually gives them good, relevant content. So there are lots of ways that we can actually prove to people, start to prove to people, to build that relationship based on trust so that we get the information and we prove that we're using that information. So let's move on. Okay, so we can get the information. Consent is really important. Two types of information, of data, become really important. The real-time stuff that we use from digital interactions and systems data. So all of our medical systems, all of our databases, all of our appointments systems, all of that data that we have in-house. Web data, behavioral data, clickstream data, all of those kinds of things, gives us a great idea of context. What are they doing? What are they looking for? What specifically are they searching for? That gives us a great clue into what it is that they want to do with us at that point in time. The history side gives me that wider set of information to make better decisions from. If I understand that Steve Allison is looking at this particular thing at this point in time, and I know a bit of the history of Steve, then I can actually make the next action much, much better for that person, whether it's recommending them to read specific articles, whether it's helping push them along a particular health path that I want them to go down, whatever it might be. The more data, the right here, right now, and that historical information to make it more personal to me, that combination is really powerful. The web data with the context is the driver of a lot of this, because that tells us that they're willing to engage right now. They're doing something with us right now that we can use as an action point to actually start them on a better journey with us. So it all starts then with collecting that web data, collecting that information. And a lot of you are already Adobe Analytics users. So you use our technology already for your websites and your applications and things to understand users and know what it is that they're doing with your sites. Fundamental part of that data collection is consent. Have they said, I can have this data? And that's great. Yes, no, whatever they've said, we know that there is consent there. The industry, and Adobe in particular, is moving a step further with that. And we're starting now to write that consent information into the data that we start to store. Okay? And that means two things. And I hope you guys have had your cup of coffee, because I'm about to talk tech. So get ready. We've put all of that data into a standardized data model. What does that mean? Basically, it means that every single piece of data we collect is assigned to a specific structure. Think of it as a dictionary. So I now know every piece of data and what that data is, and whether or not I have got consent for using that piece of data and what that consent was. Can I share it with partners? Is this reserved just personally for me and my particular department, or can I use it wider? All of that stuff gets stored in a standard format all the way through. That's actually more important than it sounds. If it's in a standard format, it means that I can immediately share that information with other systems. I can immediately translate it into any other format that I want in order to share it with the wider ecosystem. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But that data now becomes standardized with that consent information in there, and I can start to label that data. This is sensitive. This is absolutely confidential. This is stuff that I can share with other people. This is stuff that everyone has access to. This is stuff that only people of a certain level have access to. Whatever those labels might be, I assign them at the point of data ingest. Again, this becomes important because part of what we want to do is yes, have that data, but no single technology has ownership of that data. Data needs to flow everywhere where there is a need to see that data. So our approach to this, and again, you'll have heard of things like server-side forwarding and those kind of concepts. And the idea is, as I see those events happening, I bring them in, I standardize them in my model, I write that consent information, and then in the same milliseconds, I'm sending that out to all the other system that needs it. That's actually quite a big departure from the way that the industry and software vendors and everyone else used to think about collecting data. Data used to be collected into my pot, my data, and then I'd hand little bits out to other systems if I wanted. That's changed. Current thinking is that that data must flow everywhere where it's needed, so all of your systems can react in real time as they see changes to that information. So, for example, a patient has an appointment somewhere and they go onto their web app and they cancel that appointment because they can't make it for some reason. Instantly, it can notify all other systems that this appointment is not happening, or vice versa on that. Suddenly an appointment becomes available and it can instantly notify someone that, hey, here's an appointment. Are you free for it? That ability to be able to see what's happening and react everywhere in the system has become increasingly important as more and more things tend to move digitally, as we tend to have more and more of our life on our digital devices. So we can share that information. Now, remember I said that we had labeled this with all the consent information. So that means that when the GP surgery shares information with the hospital, or the hospital shares it with the surgery, or wherever else it might share that data, it only gets shared according to the rules that were written about that consent. So now I can create a whole new set of rules that say, this is how I can use that data further on. This is what I can share. And I might share that with full information. This is Steve Allison. This is the information I've got on him. Or it might be totally anonymized. Hey, somebody needs an appointment. Have you got space? That actually gives us a lot of control over that data and how that data gets used without slowing down the flow of data all the way through. So that's a big change in the way that we now collect and have the ability to use data as fast as we actually see it. The second thing, though, and this is potentially more interesting, is the fact that we can start to process that data on the fly. And by that, I mean, typically, segmenting data is something that happens. See people who are doing this, this, and this, and then they're in this segment, and that means that I can target them with this kind of content or send them for that kind of appointment or whatever it might be. That ability to do segmentation used to be quite time-consuming. You bring the data in, you crunch the numbers, you work out the segmentation, you push it all forward. Now we can do that on the edge. So we can do that as fast as we see the data. We can start to re-segment people and activate. We can do something with that data the moment we see the data actually starting to change. That becomes really exciting because that means that I can now act with that person in that same moment in time to help them get access to whatever it was that they needed, to help put them on the journey that we want them to take through our content or through our systems, through the departments, to see people, whatever it might be. Fabulous ability to take that context information that we talked about and actually make it operable now as fast as that user wants, giving them a great experience, a great level of personalization. They want something, they see something, and instantly they start to get the right kind of content back again. That is building trust. That is showing that you're using that information in a really good way. The other thing is machine learning. There's so much data out there today that a lot of people now turn to machine learning to help make sense of that data. So if I can have my machine learning going through all of that data as it flows in, spotting trends, spotting things that happen that might mean they've got, they're researching a particular illness, or, this person is always not turning up to their appointments, or whatever it might be, I can be calculating those insights the moment I see that data. And again, that means the next thing that I do has much better information to enable me to make that decision. All of this subject to that consent that I talked about. So our governance and control enables us to do that labeling, to write those rules about where and how that data gets shared. So all the data enrichments that we're doing with the machine learning, the new segments and everything else, the rules now say how, with whom, and where I can share that information. New piece of legislation, new rules, new internal policies, you just change your rules. You don't need to rechange the technology anymore. You rewrite the rules to match what it is that you want to do with that data. That seems simple, but actually that's tremendously powerful in making your data available to the right systems without compromising any of the legislative environment that we have at the moment. So fabulous. We've now got data. We've got some data enrichments. We can start to look at, how do I give the best experience for this particular patient, for this particular person that I'm dealing with? It boils down to, can I actually make all of that data resolve to a person? Data is great. Knowing who that person is even more important, especially in a medical setting where we need to know this person has specific needs and everything else, and we can't mix them up with everyone else. So being able to resolve data is tremendously important. And that means things like device graphs, identity graphs. Device graphs basically means, which of these devices do I know belongs to that particular person? So if I see that device, I know it's that person. Or maybe I see that device and I know it's that household. So it may or may not be that person, and I can take appropriate steps to make sure that I only give sensitive personal information when I'm guaranteed that it is that person because they've signed in or whatever else it might be. Again, control, allowing us those options. Device graphs allow us to understand all those different devices. Identity graphs allow us to understand all of the different IDs. And there are hundreds of IDs that people will have that we need to take into account. Your NHS number, your social security number, the app ID number, the CRM numbers sometimes, system numbers from your internal systems. There's loads of them. We can mesh those together and say that this number is exactly the same person as that number, is exactly the same as that person who came to the website. Tie all of that together, and suddenly I've now got a really good example of how all of that data comes together to give me a better holistic picture of a person, of that person. And that means, again, I can make better decisions now about what to do with them next. So give me a quick thumbs up in the chat. Is this making sense? Am I going too fast, too slow? Let me know. Give me some feedback. Perfect. Lovely. Okay. Sounds about right then. Cool. So that ability, collect data, make sure I've got consent for it, make sure I can pass that consent on, resolve it to a person, really important. And fundamentally, some of you may be thinking, oh, this sounds very much like a CDP, a customer data platform. And yeah, this is one of the reasons why CDPs are becoming very popular at the moment, because a CDP, customer data platform, brings all the data together so that we can have that holistic view of that person, and then use that as the orchestrator, the engine that orchestrates, or you've just done this, therefore you need to go and do that, or hey, you've just got the results back from this, so now I need to send you an email to say come into the doctors to discuss those results. It orchestrates because it sees everything that goes on from everywhere else. Now, this isn't a master database of everything. Okay, think of this as being a cache of data with all the relevant real-time stuff, so that I can make real-time decisions about what to do best with that customer next, with that patient next. Okay, so this is lifting data from all your other data sources, bringing it together within a real-time available profile, and then allowing that profile to be shared with any system that needs it. So the profile becomes really powerful now. That profile can contain lots and lots of different kind of information, and each of these different black boxes that you see on the diagram there can come from separate systems. So I can bring bits of data from anywhere, from any system, from any partner system, anywhere that I want, together, cached, remember, so that it's not the master record, but it is the cached information that instantly I can look up and know, hey, they've just received this email, they've just reacted to that appointment, they've just had that appointment, they've just come out of hospital, whatever it might be, all of that information in one place to enable me to make better decisions. And you'll see on here that this can contain things like, preferences. They like to have appointments in the morning rather than the afternoon. They like to be telephoned instead of emailed, or whatever that preference might be. All of this data in one place, available to everyone else. This is where we get experience from. So there's a lot of talk in vendors and digital marketing and that kind of stuff about personalization, experiences. What do we actually mean by those? A personalization is the ability to make a decision right here, right now. What am I going to give to that person? What appointment, what content, what visuals, what am I going to do with that person right here, right now? So a good personalization decision understands context, understands what you need, and makes that decision. And experience is all of those personalization decisions that come together to have a single holistic engagement with that customer. So it's the summation of all of those individual points of personalization that allow us to truly understand what's going on with that particular customer. And that's what allows us to understand, hey, this has already happened, now we should be doing this. It allows us to build that end-to-end lifetime experience because it makes better personalization decisions, because it's all drawing from that profile, which makes it really interesting to be able to build that in. Where we need additional insights, well, I already have now a set of correct real-time information that is consented for me to use, and that's perfect food for machine learning. So if I wanted to do analysis on that information, or who needs sending what kind of thing, and automatically have that processed according to their preferences, hey, fabulous. All that data is in one place, and I can execute the campaigns, the information, the journeys that I want them to take. AI can help because we've got the profile all in one place with all of that consent information. So I keep mentioning this concept of journeys. Increasingly now, we're starting to think of engaging with patients not just as a one-off thing. I need an appointment to do something. I talk to my doctor, whatever, but as a journey to achieve some kind of health end or something else. So the concept of user journeys is actually becoming more and more important. And that means not just satisfying the personalization needs right here, right now, but knowing that that is part of a journey that we are then going to want them to take. And that journey may include online and offline steps within it. So we can now start to map out what that journey is. If you're looking for information on a certain illness or disease, or want to stop smoking, or whatever it might be, that can step us or start us on that journey, and we can map out that journey now. So any particular person might be on multiple different journeys. So the way that we look at this is the journeys are common. If you want to stop smoking, if you want to have better clarity of your mind and mindfulness and that kind of stuff, there's a journey, there's a pathway that we can put you on to help that. So you might be on many of those. The pathway is the same, but your particular interactions with it, the orchestration of those pathways for you, is going to be highly personalized for you because of that understanding we have about you within the profile. I hope that makes sense. This now is allowing us to design these generic pathways that we want, and yet every step of that generic pathway is now personalized and relevant to the person that's actually involved within it. And that also means that as an organization, you start now to be able to understand exactly where they are in their journey for whatever it was, stopping smoking, losing weight, cancer, whatever it might have been. We can map out those journeys. We can go, this is where they are in it. Therefore, everything I do should know that they're here and be following on logically from that. It starts to bring together and allows us to holistically understand what's going on for those different pathways. How do we know those pathways are actually working for us? Well, that's where your analytics comes in. Many of you are already using Adobe Analytics. Adobe Analytics is particularly good at analyzing how people use our online and offline environments, how they use our apps, how they use our web pages, the pathways that they take through our content. Offline information can be brought in as well, so we can start to properly understand what those journeys are, and therefore use that information to help inform what those journeys ought to be when we start to design those pathways that they use. So again, you get kind of a self-learning feedback loop that enables you to start to understand, this is what I want them to take, this is the pathway that helps them achieve that particular goal, and the data then underpins to say, yeah, this is actually working, and this is how they're actually following it, and these are the bits that really get engagement and don't get engagement, whatever, so we can make it as efficient as possible. Efficiency helps the organization. It becomes cheaper for us. It becomes easier for us to manage if we know that we're not throwing assets, needlessly at someone who's not going to read them or whatever it might be. It also helps the customer because that's relevancy, and relevancy is trust, and trust means they're going to give us the data that enable us to make these better decisions for those particular people. So one of the big changes in the industry, and one of the big changes that Adobe's made, is a move towards a platform approach for looking at this. I mentioned earlier technologies called CDPs, and we have a real-time CDP technology that enables us to understand this user, to bring in all of that data, to create that profile, do all of that identity management, manage all of that consent and data governance, and then share that out according to the rules that we have. That's a really powerful technology. Inside that, there are a number of different features that more and more are becoming, if you like, foundational capabilities. The identity management bit, the unified profile, the ability to do segmentation, the ability to run queries against that data or run AI against that data. These are all fundamental things, foundational things. Doesn't matter what system you have, everyone should be able to use that capability. And this is why we've gone down this road of bringing everything that we do at Adobe into what we call the Adobe Experience Platform. Again, that's the bit that provides those common services to all the other systems that might need it. Any system needs to know what the last email that person saw. Hey, we got it there. You need to be able to do a segment based off all information from online and offline activities. Information's there in one place, standardized, normalized, consented, and everything else that we've got there. That makes using that data and sharing that data a heck of a lot faster, a heck of a lot easier for us to do. But also, it has the added benefit of being able to lift data out of the systems that we have. And let's face it, all organizations have some incredibly old database systems and things where they've got that data. If I can take that data and lift it out into my cache, not permanently lift it out, but I'm batching, I'm uploading that information as it changes, so I've got it in my platform, in my experience platform. That means then that I have the ability now to combine information, to analyze information from multiple data sources, to recombine and create new data sources if I want. Tremendous amount of freedom to be able to use that data to create better user journeys, better personalization, more consistent experience building that brings online and offline together to make it a real cohesive, holistic view of that particular person and their needs. It's a lot bigger than just having an efficient way of looking at data. It's freeing you up to experiment, to try, to test things. Again, all of your segmentation, all of your governance is in one place. The law changes, your needs change, you rewrite the rules. You don't need to go back and re-architect what happened underneath. You've already made those connections. For us, of course, that means that we can now use that information for email systems, for targeted adverts or content, or push notifications, or any of those other things that we do as a digital marketing company. So all of that underlying base capability is free for everything else on top of it to use. And of course, obviously, I work for Adobe, so it's all Adobe technology on the top there. But remember what I said about that data model? It's completely standardized, completely open source. So any system at all can come in, grab that information and use it, feed back in, feed off it, pass the information around, help increase the holistic oneness of that unified profile. So how do we use that then? Well, we use that actually with content. Normally, content is personalization. When we talk about personalization, we mean putting the right piece of information in front of someone's eyes. So let me give you a quick example of how we would do that, how we see that within the Adobe world. So we have our wonderful profile, which contains information about the particular person. Obviously, some of you may have heard of the Creative Cloud, and Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign and Adobe Express and all those wonderful things that help people to create content faster and easier, get it approved, know what has been approved for use where, all of that kind of management of content. So content management, we have that capability. This is a great place where AI starts to make a really big difference. AI allows us to manipulate content. I'll give you an example of that in a moment. But it allows us to recombine content, to recolor content, to reformat, resize, reshape content. So that means that it doesn't matter what size phone they have, whether it's a phone or it's a desktop screen or whether it's an internal screen within the doctor's surgery, instant ability to be able to reformat content to match that particular screen. That means that I can start to create experiences for that user that actually matter to that user. We call that experiences that delight your patients. And that's important. Yeah, they have to be getting something back. They have to have value from what it is that you're putting in front of them. And this allows us to do it. So we obviously have Creative Cloud, and we can create all of these tools. We can then put all of those assets into the repository and start to use that AI. Automated tagging, automated approval processes, routing for who it should go for, information about what areas this is relevant for and what kind of uses this can be actually used for when it goes out into the wild. When the information is out of date, that's a really underestimated point about content, is actually a lot of content has an expiry date. So your ability to be able to put it out live at a particular date and pull it all off at a particular date might be tremendously important to what you do. So we've got those controls. The way we build content is using something called content fragments. So we break down content into little bits, into paragraphs or whatever. And yes, you can relate things together. So, you know, this can't move without this piece of information, and we can have all sorts of rules like that. But this now enables us to use AI to recombine that content in different ways to make sense for that person and that person's needs at that point in time. So my user comes along, I've got these content fragments, I've got my AI. From the profile, I can now start to understand, you know, what kind of information do they like? Do they want a telephone call? Do they want to have an email? What colors do they like in their email? What kind of language, formal, informal, or would they rather have an SMS or something like that? Preferences are there. Content affinity, what kind of content they like, is there. Propensity scores, will they actually open this email or won't they open this email? All of those things become available inside the profile, and that allows us to understand how we should be recombining that content for that person or that segment at that point in time. One of the big problems with content is actually getting enough content. Understanding what people need, that's the job of the data, that's the job of the profile and all the consent information and everything else. Giving them that information, though, in a way that makes sense to them, in the way that they like to receive it, that's something that the content system needs to provide. And this ability to be able to bring those two things together and understand, be able to track, this is what they saw, this is the information we sent them, this is the color that information was in when we sent it, all of that is tracked. So we still have that holistic view of exactly what happened, because that, again, might be really important in making sure they're on the right treatment pathways and everything else. If those pathways have individual personalization steps, then I can start to use those different ways of bringing the content together in order to make it properly work for that person at that point in time. So the user journey is going to be using that information about how should I prepare this content for those people or for that segment? How does it differ between this segment and that segment, or whatever it might be? Some might like all the details. Some might like just the bare facts. Some might like bright colors, or whatever it might be. Suddenly we have that ability to actually be able to provide it without huge effort on our part, because we're using AI and we're using systems that allow us to do things like automated tagging and all the rest of it. So when we talk about the ability to build experiences in real time, to make those more streamlined, to make those more efficient, we're talking about that ability to understand data as people, to understand that people will give us that data if we show them that we have used it correctly, and therefore they are getting value from it. Then they'll give us the consent. We've got numerous studies that show that. So bringing that together and creating that profile and mapping the identities and everything else, and knowing what you can share with other hospitals, other NHS regions, the GP, all those things, knowing what those rules are means that we can flow that information much more efficiently among those different groups that need it, as fast as that information needs to travel. At the same time, we need the content that is actually going to give them what it was that they're looking for, that's going to give them the options that they want. That allows us to properly orchestrate. Where are you in that journey? Where are you right now? Are you walking the street and your phone there? Are you near the hospital that I can just send you a push notification going, hey, this appointment's just opened? Or you're on your way to the hospital, sorry, the doctor's ill, so he can't make it, your appointment's been rescheduled. Instantly tell people. That kind of adaptability and knowledge about where you are in the process and what should happen next and everything else, that's something we can now achieve using profile information, using that ability to flow information as fast as you want, depending on the context of the people. So whether they're at home researching something, walking around on the street doing a quick checkup of when their next appointment is, waiting for their results to come in and get a ping notification on their phone, all of these different contexts are actually not separate. They are the experience that that patient has with the NHS, with that particular group that they're engaged with. This allows us to have that truly holistic approach and to understand that user and create proper experiences for them that value, that show value for them, but also are efficient and much easier to manage for us, the organizations behind that, for the NHS behind that, so it understands how it can allocate resources, how it can manage its diaries, all those kinds of things that we struggle with every day. So that's all I'm going to go through today. If there are any questions that anyone has, please feel free, either stick your hand up, use the chat, turn on your microphone, whatever it might be. I am more than happy to take any questions that might be in the back of your minds there.
Whilst people are thinking about that, Steve, I just want to say thank you there. I found that really interesting, really exciting presentation. Thank you. Love the phrase experiences that delight. It would be great to do a part 2. So we could discuss that with you about hearing from those users, and how it does really delight them. So that would be really great to hear from some of the users directly. I also just wanted to reflect on you saying about the raw data and turning it into actionable data. And I often say that in the NHS, we do have an abundance of data, an abundance of information, actually, thinking about the number of dashboards we have, but actually turning them into actionable data and actionable insights is what's really critical to make sure we get some really good changes in the system.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. One of the things we've noticed is that technology will allow you to do a lot of these things, but it's also people and processes. Rethinking who needs access, what data have we got, getting technical people and practitioners and IT and everyone in the room together to actually work out what data have we got, what data do we need, how can we share this? Because actually the solution is sometimes easier than you might think if you get the teams together to discuss that. So people and process is kind of the other important part of the fabulous things that technology can do for us today.
So true. And it comes back to your point about making sure that people really see the benefit of having their data somewhere, seeing the benefit, closing that loop, making sure they're getting something back from the experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Please feel free to pop them in the chat or pop your hand up. Great, Alex.
I think it's more kind of from, hi Steve, thanks for your very, very insightful presentation, and it was really, really interesting. Thanks for sharing the slide and information that you have just presented. I think one of the very key areas that we'll be looking at from analyst text or from data and analytics perspective, what you have mentioned, is about the data literacy part of it. And this is something that is very, very important to us now, or raising quite high up on the agenda. And this is allowing the decision maker within the NHS to understand, draw the insight of the data, and then to make real decisions through the process mapping or mining that you have mentioned, and then also through the truly understand the data. But we have got increasing amount of people that are interested in data, whether it was spark up from information that was shared with them during COVID period, and they see all the charts and data from from the minister presenting, or just to have a general interest. So this is going to be something that we'll be focusing and looking at. How's that data literacy going to work? What does it mean for non-data and analytics users to understand, or for the non-data professional to actually understand? And then that lead to that decision makers accessing the data to make that information, or to make that decision. And that's quite important. So and thanks for raising the point about what you're currently working on, and then also how is that going to fit into that bigger picture.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point.
So it's not quite as a question as such, it's more from a statement.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Data literacy is obviously getting better as people start to see more data and use more data and everything else. We've got a couple of approaches to how we sort of view this. The first is suggestions. So within all of our applications, if you're using them, to suggest, hey, if you're building a segment and targeting this group, what about these groups of people? And use some of the AI to help make better decisions by people who won't necessarily know about the statistical methods going on behind the scenes, but just need to know, oh, yeah, that's good. There's a high correlation between that, therefore I'll use it. But also giving access to the people who do know, so that they can go, actually, let me slice and dice this in a different way, and use that. And it's kind of that, you need that balance between helping people do their everyday job and providing the ability to do blue sky thinking, forward thinking from the deep analysts. But yeah, it's a very interesting area.
Absolutely, and thanks for the insights. Like I said, it really kind of spark up some of the interest and excitements that is going to be coming, and some things that it would be really good to work with you to look at, how we can actually showcase this. What do we need to do, and then also more importantly, what are people looking for, and understand how we're going to be constructing some of the courses or learning material to support that, or the different personas that we'll be looking at.
Yeah, and we will be delighted to take that journey with you.
Expertly done. Oh, I just clicked over to 10:46, but exactly to time. Thank you so much, Steve. I'm sure the offer's there if people want to reach out to yourself or others at Adobe if they've got any follow-up questions.
Yep,
and we will make the recording available to those who couldn't attend today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Steve, again.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Have a great day. Bye.